The big old house was quiet that first morning, too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy, waiting sort. I'd seen enough of those places in my time. They all had the same feel, money and history, usually some kind of sorrow clinging to the walls. My job was to make sure that quiet didn't turn into something worse for Ethan. He was the reason I was there, a kid barely out of his teens, pale and, well, fragile, I guess you'd say. My kind of work usually dealt with flesh and blood threats, things I could see and hit. This felt different already. I started my rounds like any other day, a routine almost burnt into my brain. Check perimeter, check windows, doors, security feeds. The mansion was a maze of dark wood and stained glass, a relic from another time, perched up on some forgotten hill in upstate New York. It was supposed to be a safe haven, a fortress. My job was to make it one. Up on the second floor, down a long hallway lined with portraits staring out with dead eyes, I paused. One of the security cameras, the one near the master suite, was tilted. Just a hair. Not enough to throw off the coverage entirely, but enough to break the perfect alignment. My eye twitched annoyingly. It was probably just poorly installed, or maybe the old house was settling. Who knows? I reached up and adjusted the angle, clicked it back into place, a crisp, mechanical sound that echoed a little too loudly. Just a small thing, no big deal. Later, in the kitchen, making breakfast for Ethan, a meticulously prepared oatmeal with berries because he barely ate anything else, I put my coffee mug down on the edge of the granite counter. Always 5 inches from the edge. Habit. A good one. Keeps things from getting knocked over. I turned to grab the milk from the fridge, the rubber seal hissing as it pulled open. When I turned back, the mug was almost right on the edge, closer. It had moved, maybe an inch or so, and it felt warm. Not hot, not like it had been in a microwave, but warm, as if someone had just placed their hand on it. I hadn't even poured the coffee yet. I blinked, staring at it. My brain tried to process. Did I really put it 5 inches away? Maybe I'd been tired, still half asleep. No, I always do that, always. I picked it up, the ceramic cup feeling surprisingly heavy, the warmth fading against my palm. My eyes scanned the empty kitchen, just me, the quiet hum of the fridge. There was no one else awake in this part of the house. No one. A tiny knot tugged in my stomach. Must have been me. Just me being clumsy. Or maybe the counter was slanted. Old houses were like that. It had to be. The next few hours passed with that feeling of a fly buzzing just out of sight. Annoying. Persistent. I kept pushing it down. Logic. Always logic. After putting Ethan through his remedial history lessons, he was bright but fragile, easily distracted. And ensuring he had his mid-morning snack, I headed up to the 3rd floor, part of my routine. Check the unused rooms, make sure they were secured. Dust-sheeted everything up there, even on the days Mrs. Henderson, the cleaner, swore she'd gone through. Old house, always dusty. The hallway was long, dim, windows too high for much light. I walked past the closed doors, rattling a few to check the locks. Then I heard it. A distinct creak. From the last room on the right. An unmistakable sound of someone putting weight on an old wooden floorboard. Not a settling sound. This was deliberate. That room, I remembered, had been locked for years. Since Ethan's parents, I think. And I have the only spare key. So, who the hell was up there? My hand went to the grip of my holster, an instinct as old as my military training. My heart hammered, a sudden hard beat against my ribs. I moved slowly, silently, my boots making no sound on the thick, faded carpet. Each step felt like an hour. The creaking stopped, abruptly, like whoever was in there had heard me. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment, the confrontation. Just like on a patrol, just like breaching a door, my training kicked in. Move, assess, neutralize. I reached the door. It was old, heavy oak, dark as tar. I put my ear to it, feeling the cold smoothness of the wood against my cheek. Nothing. Just an oppressive silence that was far too deep for a house this big. Then a sudden, icy gust hit me from below the door, a cold, damp breath that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. It wasn't just cold. It was frigid, like standing in a meat locker. And it smelled, I can't explain it, like old, wet earth and something else, something rotting. But the house was heated. I'd checked the thermostat myself just this morning. This was impossible. My mind reeled. What the hell was that? My logic, usually ironclad, was starting to fray around the edges. I crouched, peering through the keyhole. Just blackness. Utter, complete blackness. My hand found the heavy, ornate doorknob. It was cold. Too cold. I stood back up, pulled out my key, turning it with a sharp click. Pushed the door open. Immediately, the air shifted, that frigid blast rolling out, making me shiver violently. I reached inside for the light switch. Click. Nothing. The bulb must be out. Moonlight, thin and sickly, spilled through a tall, arched window at the far end of the room. It illuminated a scene that made no sense. This room, it had been cleaned. Just a few days ago, Mrs. Henderson had been in here. But everything, the old, heavy furniture draped in yellowing dust cloths, the faded, patterned wallpaper peeling in places, the thick layer of dust on every surface. It looked like no one had touched this room in decades, years, as if time itself had forgotten this one particular space. The air hung thick, stale, a grave for forgotten things. But I remembered the cleaner. I remembered seeing her come out of here, complaining about the amount of dust. My mind scrambled, trying, failing to connect what I saw with what I knew. I didn't step in, couldn't. A cold dread, unlike anything I'd felt on any battlefield, started wrapping its tendrils around my ankles. I just stood there, staring, a strange ringing in my ears. I pulled the door shut with a solid thud, turning the key again, locking it tight. One lock, then another, as if that would do anything. That night, after Ethan was tucked into bed, still looking too pale, too thin, too quiet, I tried to sleep. My room felt off. Every shadow seemed deeper, every creak of the old house amplified. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my eyes gritty with exhaustion. The silence was the worst. It pressed in on me, heavy like a physical weight. My ears started to ring, a high-pitched whine that bounced around inside my skull. It felt like someone was standing right beside my bed, not breathing, just standing there, watching. I flipped on the bedside lamp, the sudden burst of light making me flinch. Nothing, just the familiar furniture, the heavy drapes, my uniform hanging neatly on a hook. I lay back down, pulling the covers up to my chin. The feeling didn't go away. The pressure, the ringing, and now a faint, damp, musty smell, like the room on the third floor. It wasn't strong, but it was there, clinging to the air around my head. It made my stomach clench. This was insane. I was just tired, overworked. My mind was playing tricks because I was jumpy. That's all it was. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, checking the time. 11:47 p.m. Scrolling through my messages just to distract myself. I saw it. A sent message. From my number to a random string of digits I didn't recognize. My heart seized. I tapped it open. It was a photo. A grainy, slightly blurred shot of Ethan, asleep in his bed, covers pulled up to his chin. And below the photo, a single line of text. "He's asleep. You know." My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, my thumb tracing the words. I didn't take this picture. I didn't send this message. It was time-stamped 3 a.m. this morning, while I was supposedly asleep. No, I would remember something like that. Taking a picture of Ethan while he slept and sending it to a random number? It didn't make any sense. My stomach twisted into angry knots. Someone was playing a sick joke. But who? And how? I felt exposed, violated. I checked the camera roll. The picture wasn't there, not anywhere on my phone. Yet the message was clearly sent from my phone to a number I didn't know. This was a whole other level. This was an invasion. I couldn't unsee it, the message, the picture. It gnawed at me. Sleep felt impossible after that. Every shadow jumped, every creak was a whisper. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I kept seeing that picture of Ethan, his face so innocent, and those words, "You know." What did I know? What the hell did that mean? And who sent it? I decided then. I wasn't stupid. I had to document this. Everything.
Every single strange thing. Maybe there was a pattern. Maybe I was just tired and paranoid, but if I wrote it down, it would be concrete, real, not just my imagination playing tricks. I got out of bed, pulled on a t-shirt and sweats, grabbed the small leather-bound notebook I used for mission logs, the one I kept hidden in my duffel bag, found a pen. My hand trembled slightly as I uncapped it. I wrote about the camera, the mug, the sound on the third floor, the cold, the smell, and then the message. I wrote it all down, trying to keep my hand steady, trying to push away the shivers that kept running down my spine. The room felt colder now, despite the heater. The air felt thick, buzzing, as if it wasn't just me in here. I wrote for a long time, meticulously detailing everything, every illogical anomaly. Finally, exhausted, my head aching, I closed the notebook. I put it on my nightstand, climbed back into bed, and finally, mercifully, fell into a restless, fitful sleep. The next morning, the first thing I did was reach for that notebook. I needed to reread my notes, to make sure I hadn't imagined half of it. My fingers fumbled with the clasp, pulling it open. I skimmed my frantic script from the night before, my eyes bleary from lack of real sleep. And then I stopped. Below the last sentence I'd written, below my own desperate attempts to make sense of things, 2 words had been added, in my own handwriting, my familiar, slightly slanted script. "Can't hide." I stared at it. Cold, pure dread washed over me, chilling me to the bone. No, I hadn't written that. I knew I hadn't. I put the pen down just before I went to sleep. This wasn't possible. It was impossible. But the words were there. My words. And the implication. My sanctuary. My private thoughts. They had been touched, invaded. A faint, sickly sweet smell, like decay and damp earth, wafted up from the pages. My breath hished. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, as if the words would disappear. But they didn't. They just sat there, stark and terrifying. It knew I was trying to find it, and it was telling me, what? That I couldn't get away? That it was already here, with me? I felt completely, utterly exposed. The house wasn't just reacting to me. It was watching, and it had written back. This wasn't just things moving. This was personal, and it knew me. My hands started to shake. I could feel my heart pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. And I had no idea how to fight a ghost that could write in my own journal. The notebook was still there on my nightstand. The words, "can't hide," still stared up at me, written in my own hand. My hand. I must have been so tired I wrote them myself. But I knew I hadn't. That's the problem, wasn't it? Knowing something, but it being wrong anyway. My head hurt, a dull, throbbing ache behind my eyes. I pushed the notebook back, out of sight beneath my phone. No, I wouldn't look at it again. Not right now. I got up. The floorboards creaked. The house was awake, too. This wasn't some old building settling anymore. This was something else. I could still smell it, that damp, earthy smell, even in my room. It faded and came back, like a breath. I took a deep, shaky one. Stay logical, Sarah. That's what you do. Protect the kid. That's why you're here. First things first, Ethan. I went through the motions, a soldier on parade, putting one foot in front of the other. Checked the perimeter, checked the feeds. Everything looked normal now. Too normal. The camera on the second floor was perfectly aligned. My coffee mug from breakfast, more oatmeal for Ethan, because he still barely ate, stayed put 5 inches from the counter's edge. Every time I looked, it was exactly where I left it. It was like the house was playing some kind of twisted game. Or maybe I was. After lunch, I set Ethan in the living room. He liked those old black and white cartoons, the ones with the jaunty music. He sat quiet, too quiet, on the plush velvet couch. His skin looked thinner this morning, a grayish tinge to it, and his eyes, they didn't really focus. Not like they used to. He was fragile, I thought, more fragile every day. I sat there with him, watching the cartoons, pretending everything was fine. A buffer, that was my job. Protect, even from nothing. The silence in the house usually felt heavy, but now it felt expectant.
Like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Then I heard it, a small, soft giggle, just beside my ear. It sounded like a kid, giggling, a quick, airy burst of sound, like a child was playing hide-and-seek, just a few feet away, holding a hand over its mouth. But the living room was huge, high ceilings, empty, save for the furniture, and me, and Ethan. My shoulders tensed. I didn't move my head, just my eyes. They scanned the room. Nothing. The shadows in the corners were just shadows. The light through the tall windows showed dust motes dancing, not small running figures. I glanced at Ethan. He was still watching the TV, eyes wide, fixed on the absurd antics of the cartoon mouse. No change in his expression. He hadn't heard it, or he hadn't reacted. I slowly turned my head,
looking directly at the empty space where the sound had come from. Nothing. Just air. Just the faint hum of the old TV. "Ethan?" I said, my voice just a whispered question. He didn't twitch. He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the screen. I swallowed, hard. It wasn't a sound from outside. The windows were closed. The house was too solid for that. It was in here, with us. I tried to shake it off. Just a trick of the acoustics, maybe. An old house plays games, that's all. It had to be. The quiet that followed was worse than any noise. Over the next few days, Ethan grew more withdrawn. He'd stare at walls, mumble to himself. He'd stop eating altogether if I didn't practically spoon-feed him. When I tried to talk, he'd just nod slowly, eyes empty. His skin became translucent, almost. And he wasn't sleeping. Not really. I'd check on him every few hours. One night, the worry was a physical ache in my chest. I got up, pulled on my sweats, and slipped down the hall to his room. It was late, past 3 in the morning. His door was ajar, just a crack. I pushed it open slowly. The room was warm. I always made sure of that. Mrs. Henderson kept the heating on max for him. But when I stepped closer to his bed, a blast of Arctic cold hit me, like opening a freezer door. It raised goosebumps on my arms. Ethan was curled up in a tight ball, covers pulled to his chin. He was shivering. Soft, barely audible moans escaped his lips, like a hurt animal. I reached out, my hand hovering over his forehead. No fever. It was cold. So cold. Like touching ice. His skin was clammy. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice rough. He whimpered. Then, very faintly, he mumbled something. Not words, just garbled sounds, slurred and broken, like a toddler trying to speak for the first time. He stopped, took a raspy breath, a sound that seemed to tear through his thin chest, and then began to shiver again. I pulled the covers up tighter around him. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some natural sickness. This was... I didn't know what this was. But my training said, when something is wrong, find answers. I left Ethan, pulled the door almost shut, and headed down to the library. It was a vast, sprawling room, filled with thousands of books. Family histories, old treaties, dusty novels. If there was a secret in this house, it would be here, somewhere. I pulled out books at random, old ledgers, diaries. I was looking for anything about the family, anything about past illnesses, strange occurrences, anything that could explain this. Hours passed. My eyes burned. Then, buried deep behind a shelf of archaic philosophy, I found it. A small, leather-bound book. No title. Just faded, intricate carvings on the cover. It felt heavier than it looked, and it had that faint, damp earth smell about it. My heart gave a hard thump. I opened it. It was a diary. Handwriting, cramped and spidery, filled the first page. It was old, very old. I started to read. The words were difficult, in an old-fashioned script, but I could make them out. It detailed the daily life of some long-dead family member. Mundane things at first, weather, guests, and then it began. 17th day of spring, year of our Lord. I read aloud. To myself, my voice barely a whisper in the echoing library. Before I could finish the sentence, a voice, soft and breathy, hissed right into my ear. My own voice. So close, it made me jump.
I yelped, a strangled sound, and spun around. Nothing. Just the rows of books, the dim lamps, the heavy, waiting air. My heart was galloping now. My breath hitched. No, no way.
I shook my head, my hands trembling as I held the heavy diary. That wasn't real. It couldn't be. My eyes fell back to the page. There was a faded, sepia-toned photograph tucked into the leaf. An old family portrait. A woman, severe, dressed in black, with a young boy beside her. But something was wrong with the photo. As I watched, a dark, shimmering spot seemed to bloom on the woman's face. It spread like ink, fresh, wet ink, bleeding across the faded tones. It was forming a shape, a grotesque, distorted face, not hers, something else. And with it, a wave of that damped, rotten smell washed over me, overwhelming. Like 1,000 graves had just opened in the library. My stomach churned. I wanted to gag. I squeezed my eyes shut, then forced them open. The ink-blot face was still there, spreading, consuming the woman's features. It was a smile, a wide, mocking, toothless smile. I looked away, gasping for air. The smell was everywhere. It crawled up my nose, lodged in my throat. This was too much. My skin felt clammy. This was actively trying to mess with me. I forced myself back to the diary, scanning the cramped script. The woman in the photo, the diary spoke of her. It called her the sick one. She experienced whispers and shifting images. It described how she fought it with all her strength, how she pleaded for release, but the more she struggled, the stronger it grew. My blood ran cold. The words seemed to echo in my mind. The more she struggled, the stronger it grew. Was that what I was doing? Was my fight, my attempts to rationalize, to find answers, was that just feeding it? Making it worse for Ethan? Right as that thought solidified, the single overhead lamp in the library flickered. Once, twice, then it died, plunging the vast room into near-total darkness. A thick, inky blackness that seemed to swallow the light from the desk lamp I was using. I fumbled for the switch on the wall, clicking it up and down. Nothing, not a flicker. I ripped my phone from my pocket, blinding myself for a second with the sudden burst of the flashlight. The beam cut through the heavy air, illuminating dust motes dancing in the void. Only the small desk lamp now fought against the oppressive darkness. The silence that followed the lamp dying was absolute, heavy, suffocating, not a sound, just my own ragged breathing. I held the phone's light to the diary again. My eyes darted to the faded photograph. The ink-blot face was still there, but now I saw something else. A faint, almost transparent reflection. Behind the sick one in the picture. My reflection. Standing there, a shadowy figure, with a slight, almost invisible sneer on its face. Myself, but not me, not the me I knew. It was there for a fraction of a second, then it was gone, vanished. Just the ink stain and the faded picture. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the diary. I was seeing things. This wasn't real. But then, that face, that sneer, my face. I shut the diary with a loud thud. Everything was falling apart. My mind, my senses, my past. Had it been there all along, watching, twisting things?
I raced back to Ethan. Tears stung my eyes. He was worse. He wouldn't look at me, but his body shuddered constantly, small, convulsive tremors that racked his frail frame. His face seemed sunken, older. His eyes, they looked hollow. "Ethan," I choked out, a raw sound. "What's happening to you?" He just stared at the wall. Then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes found mine, but they weren't his eyes. They were black, deep, endless black, like polished obsidian, and old, so old, decades, centuries, all concentrated in the gaze of this frail boy. A heavy wooden table, once normally warm to the touch, was next to him. I leaned against it for support. My hand brushed the surface. It was cold, bone-chilling cold, like it had been carved from solid ice. Impossible. "Ethan," I tried again, my voice trembling. I needed to connect, to ground him, to ground myself. "Ethan, it's Sarah. Look at me. We need to go." He blinked. The blackness in his eyes receded a little, replaced by a flicker of terror, a flash of the old Ethan. Just a flash, but it was there. Through the large archway of the living room, I noticed the massive antique mirror. It reflected the room, warped slightly by the old glass. But in the reflection, behind Ethan, it wasn't him. It was an old man.
Gaunt, with wispy white hair, and those same deep, black, impossibly ancient eyes. He grinned, a wide, terrifying, knowing grin. His face seemed to flicker. Then the real Ethan, standing beside me, let out a small, terrified gasp. He saw it too. His head snapped towards the mirror, his breath catching in his throat. His face, already pale, went ashen. His eyes, the usual pale blue, were wide with an unspeakable horror. He saw the old man in the glass. He saw the face. I pulled him close, wrapping my arms around his shaking body. Bone thin, so cold. Every instinct screamed at me, "Get out, get him out, now." "I'm getting you out of here, kid," I whispered, pressing his head against my shoulder. "I swear, we're leaving." He didn't respond, just shivered. But the terrified look in his eyes, the pure fear he felt for that thing in the mirror, it solidified something in me. This wasn't in my head. This was real. This was happening. And I was the only one. I spent the next hour making a plan, a quick, decisive escape. Gathered essentials, food, water, first aid. I put everything in a worn duffel bag. My weapon was loaded, satchel on my back. I would get him out, no matter what. This house, this thing, it wouldn't have him. It wouldn't have me. I came back for Ethan. He was standing by the door, slumped against the frame, still pale, still shivering. His eyes were downcast. "All right, kid," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "Time to go. We're getting out of here." I offered him my hand. He didn't take it, just stood there, motionless. His lips parted slightly. No sound came out. His eyes, they were dark again, opaque. I reached for him, taking his arm. He was bone cold to the touch. I tried to pull him gently forward, but he was like a statue, immovable. "Ethan, come on," I urged, the panic rising in my throat. "We have to go, now." Suddenly, a voice, weak and raspy, but undeniably Ethan's, drifted from behind me, from the living room we had just left. "Go, Sarah. Don't believe." My blood ran cold. I froze. My head snapped around. The living room was empty. No one there. Just the dead television and the vacant sofas. I whipped my head back to Ethan. He was still standing there, motionless, his mouth still slightly open, his black eyes staring blankly at me. He hadn't spoken. He couldn't have. The voice was behind me. Just then, his body spasmed, a violent tremor that ran through his entire frame. His eyes rolled back. His lips quivered, and a thin line of foamy white liquid, tinged with pink, began to dribble from the corner of his mouth. He gagged, a horrific, wet sound, and then his legs gave out. He slid down the doorframe, a puppet with its strings cut, collapsing onto the polished hardwood floor, in a heap. He convulsed. His small body thrashed, limbs flailing uncontrollably. My heart seized. "Ethan!" I screamed, dropping my bag, rushing to him. As I did, the massive, heavy oak front door, the only exit, directly to my left, slammed shut with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the entire house. Then a thick, black, tar-like substance began to ooze from under the gap at the bottom of the door, crawling, spreading across the floorboards. It looked like blood, but it was too dark, too viscous. And the smell, oh God, the smell. It wasn't just damp earth anymore. It was overpowering, ghastly, a thick, sickening stench of decay, like thousands of corpses were rotting just beyond that door. It filled my lungs, burned my throat. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. It was fused, solid, immovable, like it had become one with the frame. I slammed my shoulder into the door. Nothing. It was like hitting solid rock. No give. Not a single creak. I was trapped. We were trapped. I fell to my knees beside Ethan, ignoring the black ooze, ignoring the smell, ignoring the terror that was now clawing its way up my throat. He was still seizing, his eyes rolled back, foam and a thin stream of blood now bubbling from his lips. His body was colder than ever. I pulled him into my arms, desperate, held him tight. My eyes, frantic, scanned his face, his neck, looking for any sign, any damn thing. And then I saw it. On his pale, almost translucent wrist, just below his cupped hand, a small, shimmering tattoo, like it had just been drawn with fresh, wet ink. A coiled snake, intricate, sinister.
In the picture of my mother, the one I sometimes looked at, the one I'd forgotten she even had until I saw it again a week ago. The same position, the same coiled snake. No, this wasn't happening. This wasn't real. My mother never had a tattoo like that. Did she? I couldn't remember. I closed my eyes, trying to force the memory. Nothing. Ethan's body spasmed one last, violent time in my arms. The snake tattoo on his wrist seemed to shimmer, to pulse, with a faint, dark light, like it was alive. And I knew then, it wasn't just him. It had never just been him. I was on my knees, still holding Ethan. His small body still shuddered in my arms, but it was a different kind of shudder now. Slow, deep. The black sludge kept oozing from under the front door, spreading over the polished wood like a tide coming in. It had that smell. Thick, so thick, like a whole field of dead things. I tried not to breathe it, but it was just everywhere. My throat burned. This wasn't right, none of it.
I looked down at my watch, the digital face a small, comforting glow in the dim light. 4:17 a.m. The seconds ticked by. 4:17:01, 02, 03. I watched it. The second hand stopped, just froze. My breath hitched. I blinked. 03. Still 03. My eyes darted to Ethan, then back to the watch. 4:17:08. 7 seconds had just vanished. Poof! Gone, like a bad dream. I stared, then looked away. No, that couldn't have happened. It was probably just the battery, or my eyes playing tricks. My head ached too much for this. "Come on, kid," I whispered, my voice rough. I tried to pull him up, to get him off the floor, away from the creeping blackness. He was cold, unnaturally cold, like frozen ground. I put my arms around him, under his armpits, and heaved. Nothing. He didn't move. He felt like a statue carved out of stone. Every muscle in my body strained. It was impossible. He was just a boy, frail, thin. But he weighed more than a full-grown man, more than I could lift. My back screamed. My arms felt like they were going to tear out of their sockets. What the hell?" I grunted, letting go. My hands dropped to my sides. I was panting. And then he slipped, just slid, out of my grasp, like he wasn't solid anymore, like he was made of smoke. His body, which had felt like granite just a second ago, now felt like a bundle of rags. He drifted, for a second, just a breath. His small, limp form hung in the air, maybe a foot off the floor. His head lolled. For one impossible, sickening moment, he just floated there. Then, gravity decided to remember him. He dropped, not with a thump, but with a soft, dull thud, like a forgotten toy. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scrambled back, away from him, away from the ooze, away from the cold that radiated from his now still body. This wasn't just physical. This was the house. It was doing this, to him, to me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, God damn it, not like this." I had to see. I had to rip through the dark. I stood up, stumbling a little, and staggered towards the nearest light switch. Bang! Flick! The light in the hallway came on. Yellow, dim, but it was there. I found another switch, and another. Each one I flicked it on. The living room, a soft glow. The dining room, a brighter, harsher light. My plan was simple. Overwhelm it. Flood the damn place with light. Make all the shadows run. Make it visible. But it didn't work like that. The more lights I turned on, the darker the house seemed to get. It was like the light wasn't really going anywhere. It was just absorbed. The corners of the rooms, the spaces under the heavy furniture, they all seemed to deepen, to pull the light in, like a black hole. And the shadows, oh God, the shadows. They moved. They really moved. Across the floor, up the walls. Not quickly, slowly. Like something thick and oily was stretching and flowing. They wriggled through the archways, crawled along the ceilings. I could almost hear them. A faint, slick whisper of movement. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. Ethan was standing now, straight up, in the middle of the hallway. He wasn't slumped. He wasn't shivering. His pale, sunken face looked different. His lips were stretched into a wide, wide smile. A truly awful thing. It showed too much gum. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes. They were black. Just black. Like two holes punched in his face. Deep, endless black. "Ethan," I choked out, a raw, desperate sob stuck in my throat.
He didn't answer. The smile widened, and then I heard a voice, small, faint, but clear, right inside my head. It was his voice, Ethan's voice, young, scared, the voice of the boy I was trying to save. "Run, Sarah, don't look at it." It was a whisper, but it was so real, so close. I knew it. That was Ethan, the real Ethan. But the thing standing in front of me, in Ethan's skin, just kept smiling. Those black eyes watched me, and the smile stretched even wider, so wide it shouldn't have been possible. His little jaw creaked. My mind raced. 2 Ethans, one in my head, crying out, one in front of me, a puppet. That thing, it was using him, completely. I knew then, this wasn't Ethan, not anymore. "You son of a bitch," I hissed, my hand going to my sidearm. My fingers closed around the cold grip. This was it. No more running, no more rationalizing. This was a fight. Me against whatever this was. I pulled the gun. The weight of it, the familiar cold steel, was grounding. I aimed it at the smiling face, at the black eyes. "Let him go!" I screamed. I lunged, a soldier's trained response. I brought the butt of the gun down, hard, aiming for his head. A solid, brutal blow. It should have connected. It should have cracked bone. But it didn't. My arm went right through him. Or it felt like it did. There was no resistance, no impact, just air, like punching mist. But he was there, right there, solid as anything. His smile didn't even waver. I tried again. A jab, a swing. My fists flew, desperate, wild. But every single one passed through nothing. I was hitting empty space. He was a ghost, a projection. But he was standing in front of me, watching me hit a phantom. This was some kind of nightmare. I was losing it. I was really losing it. The house started to shift. The floor under my feet tilted, not a little, significantly. I reached out, stumbled, almost fell. The walls seemed to breathe. They rippled like water. The hallway, which had been straight, now stretched out into the dark. On and on. It went on forever, like a funhouse mirror. No, worse. It was like the house itself was mocking me, twisting, turning, and the shadows. Oh, the shadows were everywhere now. They thickened into shapes, not clear shapes, just blobs, darker than dark. They hovered in my peripheral vision, always just out of reach. I screamed, "Ethan, where are you? Ethan!" My voice echoed, but it was wrong. Not like an echo, like my screams fed it. The shadows around me pulsed, growing denser. The hallway stretched more, the darkness closing in. And then I heard the laughter. It was dry, like dead leaves scraping across concrete, like old bones rattling. It wasn't Ethan's laugh. No, it was cold, sharp, without an ounce of feeling. It came from all directions, and it burrowed right into my head. This was it. I was trapped in a twisted, dark maze of a house with a thing that had taken my kid. My body was useless. My mind was breaking. The laughter got louder. Then a thought came to me, clear, sharp. It wasn't my thought,
but it burrowed into my logic, found a crack, and widened it. "Release him," the thought whispered. "Just release him, Sarah. End this, Sarah." It was the only way, wasn't it? To stop it? To free him from this horror? The voice in my head, the real Ethan, had been, "Run, Sarah, don't look at it." But this new voice, this compelling, soothing voice, it made sense. A terrible kind of sense. My hand tightened on the gun. My heart was a stone in my chest. This was the only way out. For him, for me, maybe for everyone. I raised the gun. No more thought, just pure, desperate instinct. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My finger twitched on the trigger. The sound of the shot, it was loud, deafening, a sharp, explosive crack inside my skull. Not from the gun in my hand, no. It was inside my head, right in the middle of it, so loud it made my ears ring. My body jerked. I looked at Ethan. He was still standing there, unmoving, his smile wider than ever, his black eyes fixed on mine. There was no hole in him, no blood, nothing. He was fine, not a scratch. But my hand, my right hand, the one holding the gun, it was wet, hot, sticky. I slowly lowered the weapon, looked at my palm. Blood, a lot of it. A dark, ugly gash ran across the back of my hand, above my knuckles. It was bleeding freely, dripping onto the polished floorboards. A small, dark puddle was forming there. "What?" I whispered. The gun hadn't fired.
I hadn't pressed the trigger, but the blood, it was so real. I spun around, looking for something to wipe it on. My reflection. I caught it in the huge, antique mirror that was still in the living room archway. It was warped, of course. Everything was warped now. But I saw myself, my face, pale, my bloody hand. But for a split second, my reflection, it was delayed, like a bad connection. I moved my hand, and my reflection moved a moment later. And then, it wasn't my eyes looking back at me. They were black, deep, endless black, just like Ethan's. And the reflection of my mouth, my lips, they stretched wider, too wide, into that same sickeningly wide, knowing smile that Ethan had shown me. And a voice, not Ethan's, not mine, a dry, rasping whisper, like sand over stone. It filled my head, my whole being. "Thank you," it hissed. "Thank you for freeing me, and for finding me a new, far more perfect home." The words resonated deep inside me. They were mine and not mine. Something settled, something shifted. All the fear, all the panic, it began to drain away, just like that, leaving behind a kind of calm, a very deep, unnerving calm. The blood on my hand still oozed, but I barely felt it. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. The house around me settled too. The walls stopped rippling. The hallway seemed to shrink back to its normal size. The shadows retreated, fading into the corners. Ethan's body, or what had been Ethan's body, was gone. Just a blank space where he had stood. Like he had never been there at all. Only the black ooze remained, a drying stain on the floor. I didn't look at it anymore. The front door, it was open, just a crack.
A sliver of pale morning light cut through the gap, soft, inviting. I walked past the dark stain, past where Ethan had been. I didn't feel anything, no guilt, no regret, just a quiet, humming energy under my skin, a new purpose. I pushed the heavy oak door open. It swung soundlessly. Outside, the morning air was surprisingly fresh, crisp. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Birds sang. The lawn was covered in dew. It was beautiful. I stepped out of the house, closed the door softly behind me. My neighbors were already out. Old Mr. Henderson was watering his prize roses, a faded straw hat on his head. Mrs. Albright was sweeping her porch, a bright floral apron over her dress. They both looked up. They smiled. I smiled back, a wide smile. I could feel my lips stretch, maybe a little too wide, but it felt right. Mr. Henderson raised a hand in greeting. "Morning, Sarah. Lovely day, isn't it?" I just nodded, still smiling. And as I walked past him, heading down the gravel driveway, towards the world outside, a voice, dry and cold, echoed in my head. My voice, but not mine. "Next command," it whispered. "Seek out the weak mind."